Welcome back, everybody. Today, we're going to be looking into something pretty controversial.
Yeah.
And we've got some recent news articles here covering some public remarks by Justice Sotomayor.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. And she had some pretty strong words for the Supreme Court's recent decisions.
Yeah, it's not very often you hear a sitting justice publicly criticize the court like that.
Right.
Especially when it was a 6-3 ruling, like, wow, she must be pretty concerned about this.
Absolutely. And, we should probably tell everybody what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So this is the Trump v. United States case from 2024,
Mm.
and it really gets into this whole question of presidential immunity.
Oh, yeah, that was a big one.
Yeah, and, this all stemmed from that special counsel Jack Smith's investigation into Trump's actions after the 2024 election.
Right, trying to figure out if he'd done anything illegal to try to overturn the results.
Exactly.
And basically what the court decided was that former presidents, they have quite a bit of immunity from prosecution for things they did while they were in office. But there's a catch. It only applies to actions they took as part of their, official duty.
Oh, official duties.
Yeah, see, that's where things get a little fuzzy, right?
Yeah, because what exactly does that mean, official duties?
Right, like where you draw the line.
It's a good question, and I think that's part of what Justice Sotomayor is getting at in her dissent.
Yeah, she really goes after this idea that a president could be above the law.
Well, she really does, and one line from her dissent just really jumped out at me.
Oh, yeah.
She said, "With fear for our democracy, I dissent."
Wow, that's pretty powerful.
Yeah, coming from a Supreme Court justice, that's a pretty serious statement.
It really shows how deeply concerned she is about this ruling. And, it's not just about legal technicalities here.
Right.
She sees this as a threat to our whole system of government.
Yeah, she seems very worried about what this ruling could mean for public trust in the court, especially after some of the other decisions they've made recently.
Like overturning Roe v. Wade.
Yeah. Exactly. That was a huge one, and a lot of people felt like that really shook people's faith in the court.
Yeah, I can see why she'd be concerned about that. It's like, is the court becoming too political?
Right. And is that eroding public confidence in the whole judicial system?
Exactly.
And it's not just Roe v. Wade. She brought up some other cases, too, like the rulings on affirmative action.
Oh, right.
And the Chevron doctrine. It's like, are we seeing a pattern here of the court overturning long-standing precedents?
Yeah. And what does that mean for the stability of our laws? If things can change so dramatically, does that make people feel like the court is just acting on political whims instead of carefully considering the law?
Well, and that's a really important point, because if people start to think that the law is just a tool to be used for political gain, then what happens to the idea of a fair and impartial justice system?
Right. It really undermines the whole foundation of the rule of law.
Exactly. And that's, I think, what's at the heart of Justice Sotomayor's concerns here.
Yeah, she's raising some really big questions about the direction the court is heading.
She is. And I'm really interested to hear what our listeners think about all of this, too. It's easy to get lost in the legal weeds with all of this, but, these cases, they have real-world consequences for all of us.
Oh, absolutely. Like, if people start to lose faith at the courts, that could have a huge impact on our society.
Right. Like, think about it. What happens if people stop believing that the system is fair?
Well, they might be less likely to, participate in the democratic process or to trust the outcome of election.
Exactly. And that's what makes Sotomayor's warning about public trust so important.
It's not just some abstract legal theory. It could really undermine the fabric of our society.
Yeah. And it's interesting because this isn't just Sotomayor's opinion.
Right.
Public opinion polls have shown that approval ratings for the Supreme Court have been dropping in recent years, especially after some of these controversial decisions.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense if people feel like the court is becoming more partisan, they're going to be less likely to trust it.
And it's not like the White House is, really addressing these concerns.
What did they say about Sotomayor's criticisms?
Well, they released a statement, but it was pretty brief. Just said, this historic 6-3 ruling speaks for itself.
That's interesting. It's almost like they're dismissing her concerns.
Right. It's like they're saying, well, the majority ruled, so that's the end of the story.
But Sotomayor's point is that the court's legitimacy isn't just about the number of votes.
Right.
It's also about public perception and whether people believe that the court is acting fairly and impartially.
Exactly. And I think that's a really important distinction, because the court's power doesn't just come from its ability to make decisions.
Right.
It also comes from the public's willingness to accept those decisions.
And to abide by them.
Yeah. And if people lose trust in the court, then it's going to be a lot harder for it to function effectively.
No one wants to see a system where people just ignore rulings they don't agree with.
Exactly. So what does all this mean for, everyday Americans?
Well, Sotomayor argues that the court needs to be a lot more careful about overturning established law
Okay.
because creating this kind of instability can lead people to believe that decisions are based on politics rather than legal principles.
And that's a dangerous road to go down.
It is, because if people start to think that the law is just a tool for politicians to get what they want,
Yeah.
then the whole idea of a fair and impartial justice system starts to crumble.
And Sotomayor admits that she's feeling pretty discouraged about all of this.
Really?
Yeah, she actually used the word despair to describe how she feels about the court's direction.
Wow.
But she also says that she's not giving up. She's
Yeah.
going to keep fighting for her vision of justice.
Well, that's good to hear. I mean, it's easy to get cynical about these things.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember that there are people who are still committed to upholding the Constitution and to making sure that the law is applied fairly.
And I think her willingness to speak out, even when it's unpopular,
Yeah.
that's a powerful reminder that dissent is a vital part of a healthy democracy.
Yeah, it forces us to confront these tough questions and to consider different perspectives.
Exactly, and that's what we need to do as a society.
Right.
We need to have these conversations about the role of the court and what we want our justice system to look like. Yeah, it can all feel a little overwhelming sometimes, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But we're not powerless here.
No, absolutely not.
I mean, Sotomayor's dissent, it really reminds us that even in a system like the Supreme Court, there's still room for dissenting voices,
Right.
for challenging the status quo, for pushing for change.
And it's not just about legal arguments either. It's about, we all need to be having these conversations, understanding the different perspectives, forming our own informed opinions
Yeah, that's so important.
about the role of the court in our society.
Because at the end of the day, this wasn't just about one legal case. It was about exploring these really big questions about, the rule of law,
Yeah.
public faith in one of our, most important institutions.
Exactly. And it all boils down to this fundamental question: is anyone truly above the law?
Even a former president.
Yeah. I mean, Sotomayor argues that that principle is at the very heart of our democracy.
And she leaves us with a lot to think about.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, what does this ruling mean for future presidents?
How will it affect the balance of power in our government?
How do we hold those in power accountable while still, respecting the complexities of the law?
It's not easy.
No, it's not. And I think these are questions that all of us need to be thinking about.
Yeah. It's a good reminder that our democracy, and it's not a spectator sport, we all need to be engaged and paying attention.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to hear from you. What are your thoughts? What stood out to you in this conversation? Where do you stand on this whole issue of presidential immunity? What concerns or questions do you have after hearing all of this?
Yeah, keep the conversation going. Challenge your own assumptions. Engage in thoughtful dialogue, about the role of the Supreme Court and what kind of future we want for our democracy, because ultimately it's up to all of us to make sure that our system remains fair and just and accountable.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. Until next time, stay curious. Keep those critical thinking skills sharp. And remember, knowledge is power. But understanding is wisdom.